In Mexican and Texano folklore, chilling stories have long been told of a creature known as La Lechuza. As the legend goes, La Lechuza appears in the form of a massive owl standing 7 feet tall with a wingspan of 15 feet, in the face of an old woman. Of course, there are several variations on the legend of the witch owl. In some tellings, La Lechuza mimics the cries of children to lure unsuspecting victims out of their homes and devour them. In other versions, hearing the cry of La Lechuza is an omen of death. The creature is said to bring storms and to feed on negative human emotions, often appearing outside homes where there is a domestic dispute, waiting for its victim to emerge. In some tellings, La Lechuza preys on drunk men stumbling their way home from the bar. In others, she craves the blood and flesh of newborns, particularly those who are not yet baptized. Some say La Lechuza is a witch who has sold her soul to the devil, others that she was once a woman who was wronged by the members of her village. In certain regions, legend says the woman's child was killed by a drunk, others that the woman herself was killed, leaving her to stalk the skies at night, waiting to enact her wicked vengeance. Do not whistle 3 times at midnight, children are told, for it serves as an invitation for La Lechuza, and will most certainly end in death. You're listening to History Uncovered, brought to you by the digital publisher All That's Interesting, where we explore the uncharted corners of the natural world and the world past.
I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey. Today, we'll be digging into the fascinating legend of La Lechuza. But before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder that for the next 2 months, we'll be conducting a survey as part of the Airwave Network to help us to get to know you, your interests, and what you think of the show. You can find the questionnaire at surveymonkey.com/r/airwave. And as a special thank you, you'll be entered for a chance to win a $500 Amazon gift card. Again, that's surveymonkey.com/r/airwave. Or you can click the link in our episode notes. Once nothing more than a mortal woman, La Lechuza ultimately became a vengeful, vile creature bent on terrorizing those who have wronged her. And though the legend of La Lechuza sounds like something out of a book of scary stories or folk tales, there are several real-life accounts of those who claim to have had an encounter with La Lechuza, some more recent than you might imagine. One encounter took place in the 1950s in the border town of Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. Rumors swirled that a Lechuza had been terrorizing the town. The townsfolk traced the Lechuza to a home nearby and made a plan to lure her out and kill her. One man even offered to use his own child as bait. When the Lechuza appeared and attempted to grab the child, the townsfolk opened fire, a few bullets striking the Lechuza's claw before it flew off. The next day, the concerned townspeople visited the house of the alleged witch, and when she answered the door, her leg was bandaged and she needed a crutch to walk. The tale of La Lechuza is widespread across parts of northern Mexico and Texas, but like any folk legend, the details vary. Some say La Lechuza is a single bruja, or witch, who appears human in the day and transforms into a large owl with the face of a woman. At night, feathers sprout from her skin, her feet turn into large, grotesque talons, and her arms stretch to a length of 15 feet, her hands giving way to massive wings that allow her to soar through the air at terrifying speeds. She finds a perch outside of bars, waiting for lone, drunk men to step out into the cool night air, unaware of the terror that awaits them. In an instant, La Lechuza pounces on her victim, digging her talons into his flesh and lifting him high into the air, carrying him back to her lair. The last thing the man ever sees in a drunken haze is the blood-covered and eerily human face of La Lechuza as she rips the flesh from his body, piece by piece. In some tellings of the legend, however, La Lechuza is not a witch at all, but rather a witch's familiar sent to do her bidding. Some even claim La Lechuza is a minion of Satan himself. In all versions of the story, though, La Lechuza is said to take humans as her prey. There are those who say she steals away children who wander from their homes after dark, so she can feast on their flesh and bones. Others say she kidnaps children out of a sorrowful sense of longing, hoping to replace the child she once had. a child who had been killed by the villagers in her town. But La Lechuza does not just feed on the flesh of her victims. She feeds on their emotions. She seeks out those in distress or waits outside the homes of quarreling couples, acting as a psychic vampire. When she's had her fill, she mimics a baby's cry, hoping to lure her unsuspecting prey out of their home to steal them away. Those who remain indoors often say they awoke in the morning to find scratch marks on their doors and windowsills, a sign that La Lechuza had visited and will likely return. However, there are ways to protect yourself from La Lechuza. Some say that hanging a rope with 7 knots outside your home is a sign to La Lechuza that you have acknowledged her presence and respect her. If she sees this, she'll leave you alone. Meanwhile, others have taken to lining their doors and windows with salt at night to dispel La Lechuza. And if you're out walking at night and see La Lechuza flying towards you, you can repel her by throwing a combination of salt and chili powder in her face. Or if you don't happen to have those on hand, you can recite the Catholic prayer, La Magnifica, taken from the Gospel of St. Luke, in which the Virgin Mary praises the power of God. An important note, however, the prayer must be recited forwards and backwards. In all, the legend of La Lechuza has been told countless times and in countless ways. But where did this terrifying story originate, and why has it remained such an enduring one for hundreds of years?
Like many legends, the exact origins of La Lechuza can be difficult to pin down, but this creepy story appears to be several hundred years old and likely emerged during the time of the Spanish conquest of the Americas. Before then, civilizations in Mesoamerica had a complicated relationship with owls. Though they had a spiritual connection with numerous animals and often saw them as spiritual allies or deities, owls sometimes played a slightly darker role in their mythology. In Mexico, for example, ancient people associated owls with the god of rain and saw them as a bad omen. In Peru, owls were sometimes seen as minions of the underworld. But then the Spanish arrived starting at the end of the 15th century, and the reputation of the owl plummeted even further. That's because the Catholic Spanish saw any sort of spiritual connection with animals as paganism. This devilry, they decided, must be stamped out. The Spanish spread the word that animals like owls were associated with dark forces. And since Spanish Catholics especially feared witches, owls and other animals like cats were increasingly associated with witchcraft. That's why, in many legends of La Lechuza, the creature is described either as a woman who transforms into an owl or as a witch who uses owls to carry out her evil deeds. From these murky origins, the legend of La Lechuza started to take form. Many versions of the legend describe how a local woman was put on trial for being a witch, found guilty of practicing dark magic, and sentenced to death. Instead of staying dead, however, she returned as a giant owl who could mimic crying babies and frightened women in order to lure in her victims. And as the centuries passed, the legend of La Lechuza evolved and modernized. One version states that La Lechuza came into being after her own child was executed for a crime they didn't commit. Mad with grief, the owl woman then began snatching other children instead. Another version of the legend suggests that La Lechuza had a child who was killed by a drunk driver. Furious, she cursed the entire bar district of her town and spent her nights turning into an owl, looking for drunks to attack and kill. In any version, this legend is certainly a disturbing one, but La Lechuza isn't the only myth that describes women being turned into owls. There's something about an owl's intense, steady gaze that has horrified and fascinated humans for centuries. We'll get into some of those similar legends, as well as humankind's seemingly endless fascination with owls, next.
I am like a folklore fanatic. Not the Taylor Swift album, though I do like that as well.
Yeah.
It's a good album.
Yeah.
But no, I have like maybe 10 or 12 books about folklore like on my bookshelf right now.
Wow. Is La Lechuza in those books, or is this a new story for you?
Surprisingly, no, it wasn't. It was new for me, which was kind of cool. Kind of makes sense that it's not in any of these books. I think because it's so prominent, but in just such a select region that it's not as big as like, I think everyone... not everyone, but people who are interested in this kind of stuff in like history and things might have heard of like the Banshee. It's pretty well known. Stuff is named after banshees. The Wendigos had like sort of a renaissance in the past couple years. So like a lot of those bigger name ones. And then La Lechuza seems much more like, even in today's world, passed along orally and in families and in specific small communities. Even the stories we found online were all like personal accounts of like, oh, my grandmother told me this, or like in my small town there was this thing, and it's like a generational kind of thing versus some of these more like culturally widely ingrained folk stories.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about it too, is it was so like personal for so many people even still.
Were there, in your folklore books that you have, were there other like owl legends, or did that also seem like more of a unique thing?
There are. Mostly I've noticed it in Native American folklore. And it was very similar to the story of La Lechuza, which was sort of where I wanted to go with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have a specific name. I know that a lot of Native American folklore, I don't want to like lump all Native American tribes in together, but I can't off the top of my head remember which tribes specifically this lore comes from. But I will say, like, I've read stories of people and things that have been passed down that like some Native American tribes viewed owls as bad omens, very similar to La Lechuza. There are a lot of stories of like kind of similar like owl women. They were harbingers of doom. They were signs of death. A lot of like very similar sorts of negative connotations, which I always thought was really interesting because as a kid who grew up in the early 2000s and saw Harry Potter, you kind of think owls are like good cute companions, and like at least people on this half of the ocean seem to not have seen it that way.
That's a really interesting point. When I was researching this subject, I was thinking about in New York, one of the big stories in the last couple of months was this owl that was someone broke into his enclosure in the zoo and he got out. He's just like living in Central Park. And people are obsessed with him. His name is Flacco.
Nice.
And there was an article in the New York Times about like, why do people like owls so much? And kind of went through all these, like Harry Potter, but also like King Arthur. There were owls in that legend as well who were good and shared knowledge and everything. And it's really interesting that this is more of a negative owl story, because there are a lot of like really like positive ones about owls. People love owls.
Yeah, I think I'm going to like look it up real quick. Here we go. Many tribes across the country not only believe that owls have a correlation to death but also the afterlife. Here's some tribes, specifically the Lakota, the Omaha, the Cheyenne, Fox, Ojibwa. Not going to try and pronounce that one. Sorry. Cherokee. These tribes all think that the owls were embodied with the spirit of the dead or associated with spirits in some way. A lot of them symbols of death. I think it's because primarily owls are predatory and nocturnal.
Yeah, and they do have like a blood curdling scream sometimes. Yeah, right. In the research I did about like Native Americans, the Yakima, the Choctaw, it's all like a lot of like witches, a lot of owls that can change into people, and usually bad news when they show up on the scene.
Yeah, a lot of like magical sort of interpretations of owls. Even similar to one version of La Lechuza, where some people thought that owls were familiars for witches or for sorcerers.
Right.
Whereas, like, I think like the kind of more common perspective on owls now is like associations with wisdom. Even like, don't know how much this is going to hit for some people, but The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. One of the first things that happens is you encounter an owl who is like your guide on that journey. So, I mean, obviously that's a Japanese game, so I'm curious about the Eastern perspective on owls versus like the more historical Western perspective as well.
Yeah, there was this article we did I think it was almost like a year ago, about these in Spain. There's like hundreds and hundreds of owl carvings they found, and they didn't know what the deal was with them. And then this one researcher thought maybe they were like toys that kids had made, and like, why would they have chosen owls? And it's like, well, owls are just different looking and they kind of catch your eye. And they would have been around these like Copper Age settlements because there's rats to eat and like, there's food supplies.
Yeah.
So the kids would have like known what an owl is. And part of the project, he just asked kids of what he thought would be the similar age as these Copper Age kids to draw an owl. And the two like illustrations were really similar because they catch out there, they pick up on the owl's like big eyes and the tufts in their ears and everything. It's just the kind of animal where like if you're like an owl, people know exactly what it is and how to draw it and everything. They draw us in.
They're far more distinct than like a lot of other birds. Like, I mean, anyone can say a pigeon and know what a pigeon looks like. Cardinal, blue jay, some of those. But like, I don't think I could draw. I can maybe draw a pigeon because they're kind of boring.
Just like a bird, gray bird. Yeah.
But like, I don't know if I could draw two pictures, one of a cardinal, one of a blue jay, that look distinct from one another other than the color.
Yeah. And owls are different because they're just different looking.
Right.
In that New York Times article about Flacco, someone they interviewed was like, well, people are drawn to owls because they like have these like attributes almost like human infants. Like they have round faces and round eyes. And if you think about why humans are drawn to certain animals like pandas, there's like a similarity there. So maybe that's why we were so into owls. Yeah.
And owls can also be fairly large, like in certain regions. I mean, barn owls are relatively small, but there are owls that I think get pretty big. And so I'd imagine like, especially in the native inhabitants of what is now North and South America, we're much more like attuned to nature than European counterparts. But so much of their religion and their spiritual beliefs revolved around nature and like our relationship to nature. And so seeing this thing at night in the trees that looks a little eerily human,
right? Like
it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, you could see why they'd have that connection between, this thing might be able to shapeshift or be a human during the day or something. Yeah, they do have that human look about them. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like a barn owl, which has a very pale feather on its front. It's very white.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely kind of stands out the same way that like a pale human would.
Yeah, sitting in the trees. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, they're fascinating. I remember like one summer I was at home in Seattle and there was an owl and my siblings and I just like sat outside and watched it for literally like 12 hours straight. We just sat and like watched him in the trees. Every now and then he would fly down and like catch something in the ground and then go back. I don't know why he was hunting during the day. That seemed kind of odd, but it was fascinating. It was like we couldn't take our eyes off of him.
Yeah. Yeah. I go to the aviary. I used to at least go to the aviary fairly often here and would look at the owls. They have these like tiny little ones that are like the size of your hand. And they just poke their heads out, spin all the way. Plus, yeah, they can spin their heads all the way around. Like owls are weird.
Oh yeah,
birds.
right. Demonic.
Really
yeah,
weird.
That's true.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up another story too about like why owls might be seen as like these terrifying creatures, which is another article we have on the site, but it's about like an alien encounter from 1955. And it's considered like one of the most famous ones because it's a group of people who all describe seeing the same thing, which is basically that they were at home and aliens attacked them and they chased them off with guns and then ran into town and called the police. And one explanation for what could have happened was that maybe they were drunk and maybe an owl was swooping down on them at night. And that seemed like an alien because it had the shiny eyes and...
Yeah. Is that the Kelly Hopkinsville?
That's Kelly Hopkinsville, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. I actually... I don't remember where I saw it. Probably on Reddit. Might have been in the oddly terrifying subreddit. A picture of newborn barn owls in someone's attic. Before they had their feathers. They look like otherworldly. It's very freaky.
God, I can't even imagine that. That would be... I just see like chickens, I guess.
See if I can find it. I'll send it over to you. Oh, God, yeah, I came up right away. Look at these things.
Oh, my God. Those do look like aliens.
They're really scary looking.
They're standing up. They have legs and arms and everything. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, like if you put a grainy black and white filter over that, you could convince me it was aliens.
Well, especially the eyes are such like what alien eyes are supposed to look like. The big black orbs in someone's face. That's really creepy.
Yeah, when they're not covered by feathers, you really notice how kind of almond shaped and large their eyes really are.
Right.
I think the feathers kind of help hide some of that and give them almost like eyebrows, but like when they're just like nude,
right,
really freaky looking.
Yeah, I can kind of see how the people at Kelly Hopkinsville might have mistaken that if something like that came out of the trees for an alien.
Totally. What year was that too? Do you know off the top of your head? Or like
1955.
Okay, it's in 1950s. That's like height of UFO paranoia too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting story too, because I think they were one of the first to describe aliens. I think they described them as little silver men, and then the newspaper changed it to like green men, and that sort of spread from there.
Yeah. I think the little green men thing's kind of dying off. Every time I've heard of it now, they're gray men.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's like even calling them grays is like the new UFO thing.
Oh, I did not know that. I'm not up to speed with the latest UFO news, I guess.
I have a Google News alert set for
really?
UFOs. Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Ever since the Pentagon files.
Have you ever seen one before?
No, it's a mix of like I really want to, and then at the same time I don't at all.
Yeah.
It feels like it could be like a life-ruining moment.
Life-changing. Maybe.
Life-changing for sure. I don't know. Some people like, I recently watched this documentary called Aerial Phenomenon, which is all about the aerial school UFO incident. A bunch of kids in Zimbabwe saw aliens.
Did you write an article about that?
I did,
okay.
yeah. I pitched it to John and he was like,
okay,
sure.
Cool. Yeah. I think I edited your article. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you kind of know the story then. But the one girl, her life was like ruined. Her family was super religious. They wouldn't let her like talk about it. They moved to Canada. She like struggled to make friends and sustain romantic relationships because she would always inevitably be like, by the way,
I saw an alien
when I was a kid, I saw aliens, and they were like, yeah, no, I'm not touching that. It's like, all right.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like with the internet now, if you were to like be that person, you could find other believers in the world more easily.
Yeah. I run the risk of isolating myself from all my family and friends, but
you have new internet friends.
Woo!
Yeah. I wonder how prevalent this like legend is today, or if it's sort of like faded.
Yeah, it seems like most modern tellings of the Lechuza legend are retrospectives or people sharing their culture and saying like, oh, my grandma believed in this, my mother believed in this. I grew up in Mexico and there were stories about this. I mean, looking at the show notes here, we have that one Reddit account of someone who says they were almost kidnapped by Lechuza when they were a kid and that their family dog scared it away.
Yeah. And then there's like a couple of those people have had sightings, or it's not always, it seems like sometimes it's just like a big bird, not necessarily an owl, but yeah, usually an owl of some kind. And it'll be like a grandmother who's like, by the way, this is this witch thing, so watch out. Yeah,
it almost feels like one of those, you kind of see it a lot in movies, I think more, but like that like endearing old person believes in it kind of thing. It's like, I don't necessarily believe it, but my grandma does, and she grew up, more deeply embedded in like this culture than I did because my family moved from Mexico to America or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, in the movie, the old enduring grandmother is always right. And like the non-believers encounter the creature somehow.
That's also true. That's like, that happens in, off the top of my head, the Krampus movie.
Oh, there's a Krampus movie?
Oh, yeah. It's from the guy who made Trick or Treat. It's actually really good.
Oh, wow. That's funny. I know that.
I think any folklore surrounding like real animals is really interesting. I like the stories of things like Kelpies, the Banshee, Chupacabra, stuff like that is more like cryptid monster kind of verging on mythology stuff because I think it's interesting. But I always am really interested in the way that like ancient people viewed more common animals like owls, deer, mice, bears. Why were some animals treated with such reverence like bears versus like feared like owls and
right. I think it's interesting that like, one of the tribes that had this sort of owl witch legend was the Yakima, who are in like Washington State, sort of, I think, Oregon area today. And that's so far away from where this legend originated. And yet they had a very similar story about owls, which I wonder if that was because there was some sort of, it seems like trading would be impossible being that far away, but maybe there was, I don't know if that story spread somehow, or if they just kind of came to it on their own because it's true, perhaps, I don't know. But
yeah. Or even just similar sort of mindset, because regionally, like much of the United States was like covered in forest and stuff at the time.
There would have been tons of owls.
Yeah, they're not really Texas as much, but there are owls kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
Over here. So, yeah, I think maybe that's sort of like that same fear of the dark. This thing hunts at night. I don't know, like, what are other nocturnal predators? Coyotes?
Yeah.
They're nocturnal mostly. I don't think they really revered coyotes as much. I don't know why I enunciated it like that. But I think you see that a lot with like those more nocturnal creatures, is that kind of fear and apprehension, and kind of plays into like an innate human component, like shared consciousness thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Fear of the dark.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, all these creatures that are their eyes like shining in the darkness and everything would be really frightening. I mean, even now.
Whereas like you look at equally dangerous, arguably more dangerous predator, eagles, but they're not nocturnal, and so they were viewed more like in reverence.
Right. Well, and owls do attack people sometimes.
Yeah.
So where I grew up, like sometimes in the woods and stuff, there'd be signs being like, "Watch out! It's like an owl hanging out here, and he will dive bomb you." So
yeah. Well, and I'm sure too, like, they lived in significantly less sturdy homes than contemporary ones, obviously. If you have a young child, it's not outrageous to think, like, if you leave that child unattended, an owl could come down and be like, cool, that's dinner for me.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure like that kind of stuff played into it as well, or it's like, oh, we gotta like keep them away, otherwise these birds are... Whereas like you're maybe a little bit less likely to be taken by surprise if an eagle tries to swoop down and take your kid.
Could happen.
It could happen, but you're probably gonna see it.
Yep, that's true. Because like I was wondering how big of prey owls can pick up, because I think they mostly eat like mice, and I know eagles can eat like small dogs and cats if they want to.
Yeah. One of my favorite fun facts is that an eagle can carry a baby deer.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know if that's a fun fact, but that is really grisly.
A friend once asked me what makes a fact fun, and I was like, honestly, I don't know.
Well, that'll stick with me. A baby deer. Damn. Well, we'll end by saying that, like we mentioned at the top of the episode, you can go to surveymonkey.com/r/airwave and fill out a little questionnaire to help us make the show better, make it more interesting. And as a bonus, you'll be entered to win an Amazon gift card for $500. It's not bad.
No, you could use that to buy some eagle merch.
Yeah,
not
binoculars.
Eagles merch. Not eagle merch, yeah. You can buy, you know those big rubber animal heads that people wear? I think they make owl ones.
Oh, I don't know that I know about that.
Play a prank on your friends. You know, well, you like those big rubber horse heads and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen like bird versions. I'm sure they're out there.
They definitely do chickens.
Oh, God. I hate chickens.
No.
They really freak me out.
I used to have a pet chicken when I was a kid.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, but then raccoons ate it.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
Yeah. I still don't like how, like, when you touch them, they seem like they have a lot of, like, heft, and then you touch them, and it's just, like, all feather, and then you don't know where their bodies are.
So it's deceptive.
Yeah.
You don't like the deception of chickens?
I don't like it. And they're too, like, unpredictable.
That's fair.
Anyway, so that's surveymonkey.com/r/airwave.
Yeah. And thanks for listening. Stay tuned for our upcoming series on the Titanic. If you want to dive more into any of the stories we've covered up till now, or if you want more on La Lechuza or other folklore, head over to allthat'sinteresting.com and follow us on Facebook, the History Revealed Facebook page, and on Instagram and TikTok at Real History Uncovered.
Great. So we'll talk to you next time.